The focus tends to be very much on raising investment for growth, but doing it in a way that's sustainable. And there's always that balancing act that you've got to have. And it isn't always less expensive. It isn't always the best option to go green. Bringing AI into farming, into agriculture, and I think I spoke about sort of AI-powered, self-driving tractors, etc. But the transformational part of it, I think, in Africa is with smallholder farmers. All of that AI-powered systems, data on your cell phone. That's where we're seeing the real transformational power, seeing the opportunities. If you have, and I think that's one thing that Africa is really, really good at. Wherever we have challenges, we also see the opportunities there. Talking about waste, for example, and that increasing amount of landfills, I see so many entrepreneurs coming up with fantastic ideas about using waste to produce energy.
If you could change one thing about how the industry here approaches sustainability, what would it be?
Just one thing.
3 things.
Well, let's start with one thing.
Welcome back to Why Should We Care About African Data Centers, the podcast where we tackle the big questions shaping the industry. I'm your host, Ville Vaklin, and my guest today is Sayuri Moodliar, the Sustainability and ESG Director at Open Access Data Centers. In this episode, we talk about sustainability and what responsible growth really means for Africa's data center industry. Sayuri, great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, Ville. Thank you for having me.
Great. How far did you drive here to Cape Town?
I live about 100 kilometers outside the city in a sort of small rural town.
Okay. Is because this depends on a country. 100 kilometers somewhere is almost in a neighbor, and somewhere it's like really far. For South Africa, it's 100 kilometers. Is that?
It depends on whether you're in the city or out in the rural area. So I live in a rural area, so I don't take just a freeway to get here. I've got to drive through farmland to get here. So that takes a long time.
Okay, so it's a bit far.
Yeah.
What is your favorite place in Africa? Do you have one? Oh, you can.
Sure, that's impossible. I mean, choosing one would certainly be very, very difficult. Certainly, I love the country I live in. I think the fantastic thing about South Africa is that there's just such a range of different ecosystems, landscapes, everything from semi-arid on the west coast all the way through to the east coast, which is subtropical. So South Africa is fantastic. I think if I had to choose other favorite countries, Botswana, Namibia, and Kenya would be my top 3 list.
Okay, Kenya made it to the list.
Oh, yes, definitely. I would love to live in Kenya.
Yeah, I live in Kenya, so it's a beautiful place.
Oh, yeah. Sure. That would be a dream to spend a few years living in Nairobi and traveling around would be fantastic. But I'd come back home to South Africa.
Yeah, great. So you lead sustainability and ESG at Open Access Data Centers. How did you get in this sustainability space originally?
So it's been a long journey getting here. I started out as a finance lawyer working in investments, tax, structured finance. And then as things started moving about 15 years ago, we started instead of structuring for tax, we started structuring investment transactions for social outcomes and then environmental climate outcomes. And it looked like something that I, would like to do. I've also felt very strongly about nature and the environment my whole life. And went back to university, studied environmental science, and then it all sort of came together. The finance, law, I'm actually a lawyer, and the science and how you finance transactions for sustainability outcomes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit disparate, but I promise you it all works together, and every one of my skills comes in handy almost every week.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. It's a large scope, and I do want to get some of the basics done before we kind of dive deeper into the topic. So we mentioned sustainability and ESG, obviously already. So what is the difference? Let's start with the very basics. What is the difference between these two terms, sustainability and ESG, shortly?
So that's an interesting question, because currently I see that the two terms are used interchangeably. And that's okay, as long as the people using it understand that it could mean either. But the sort of etymology of ESG, it arose more in the investment space. So, when you're thinking about corporations or organizations and how you assess whether a corporation is doing well, how sustainable it is. In other words, is it resilient? How is it performing? We used to look at financial performance previously, and there are metrics that you use for financial performance. Now, for sustainability, there weren't any actual metrics that investors could use. So they came up with certain indicators, and there's various ways you can measure sustainability. Currently, the most common one is what we refer to as ESG indicators or ESG risks and opportunities. So ESG is one aspect of sustainability. It's an approach or a method of measuring sustainability where you look at environmental, social, and governance factors that affect a company. It's your non-financial performance of the company. Sustainability is a broader concept. It incorporates how the company interacts with the world and the effect it has on society and the environment, the planet. So it could be as broad as including the Sustainable Development Goals and everything to do with socioeconomic development and the environment and planet.
Okay, so still a little bit about the ESG. So who then uses like the information they get from the ESG indicators?
Well, there's various users. So you currently, if you're in a company, particularly one that's funded by investors, perhaps impact investors or a development finance institute, a DFI, they would use ESG to measure non-financial risks. So your environmental factors that will affect the company's performance, social factors that can affect that could create a risk for the company, and then the governance that around that, which also indicates to investors whether you're a good company to invest in and whether they can count on you, whether you hold yourself accountable. There's obviously a whole lot of other users as well, other stakeholders. It could be lenders, certainly, who use it quite extensively. It could be the communities that you're in. They might be very interested in what you're doing in terms of their physical environment and the communities around them. It could be your suppliers who are interested in whether they want you in their supply chain. So there's a number of different users, but primarily we see particularly ESG being used by investors, so shareholders, lenders.
Yeah, understood. So let's then speak about sustainability, and to avoid speaking about sustainability on a very abstract level, could you give me a few practical examples on what the sustainability work looks like at open access data centers, for example? Mm-hmm.
So for any data center, and I think currently we find that our work is not just limited to data centers. You're probably aware that OADC is part of the WIOCC group. So it's across the value chain of digital infrastructure. And on a daily basis, I deal with all aspects of the E, the S, and the G. Because we have investors who are private equity, impact investors, as well as DFIs, there is a huge emphasis on governance. So certainly in terms of our policies, our processes, the entire governance structures, having the right system in place, our risk management system for environmental and social risks and opportunities, all of that is incredibly important. So there's always due diligence or reviews going on around that. That's quite important. On the environmental side, there's a huge focus on energy. Of course, with data centers, we're always focusing on energy, both efficiency and then in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And then on the social side, it depends on what aspect and which data centers. If we're talking about one that's already in operations, then a lot of it has to do with how we interact with communities, with our employees, with all of the people in our supply chain, the contractors and their employees as well. If we're building a data center, then that opens up a whole can of worms, of course, because then all of the issues around construction come into play, your stakeholder engagement as you're constructing, before you construct, your environmental impact assessments. So there's a broad range of issues that you're constantly looking at as a sustainability expert within, digital infrastructure.
Yeah, and your responsibility is to take care of the compliance part of that.
That's one aspect of it. It's everything to do with managing the risks and the opportunities. And it's quite important to talk about the opportunities as well. People tend to, I think because the risks can be quite overwhelming, people focus very much on the risk management. But once you have those systems in place to manage your risk, then you can start looking at some of these challenges and how they present opportunities. So, for example, energy is a huge issue within our industry, but there are opportunities as well with regard to how we bring in systems, processes to operate more efficiently. And that's, I think, the huge opportunity in the whole energy conversation is how do we operate more efficiently? And that then affects our profitability as well. And similarly with various other aspects, social aspects as well, you can become part of that community, actually start contributing in terms of skills development, how you contribute in terms of providing infrastructure, contributing to digital transformation. So there's always those opportunities to turn the challenges that we face into something good for the communities we live in and for the organization itself.
Yeah. I'll definitely revisit some of those topics still later in this episode. But let's start with the big problem. What do you see as the biggest environmental challenge for data centers in Africa right now?
Well, I think we all know that for data centers, it's energy. And it's not just the aspect of green energy. I think for us in Africa, before we even get to the conversation about green energy, we actually just want to find reliable energy that we can count on. Just having access to energy is a huge issue in Africa. So it's those three aspects: having access to energy, making sure it's reliable and consistent, and then looking at how do we have cleaner energy as well. So that is our biggest challenge. I think it also, like I said, the overarching theme that I find in my work is that every challenge presents an opportunity. The big opportunity for me is that similarly as we had with mobile phones, where we were able to, in Africa, leapfrog directly from having no connectivity to going to mobile phones, there's large parts of Africa where we don't have data centers, we don't have energy systems, we don't have grids. So it presents this opportunity for us to directly start looking at how do we put in the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, in a way that's clean and that's good. And we can actually leapfrog forward without having to go through that process that the rest of the world has gone through.
Yeah. Like concretely, for example, in South Africa now, how is the energy generated? Like what kind of energy sources you have?
So in South Africa, it's coal-powered energy, unless the organization itself has, so for example, in our Durban data center, we have solar panels. So many organizations will have their own solar panels. And there are various other options as well. You can enter into power purchase agreements. You can have a number of organizations that offer wheeling arrangements where you can enter into contracts. You still get your electricity off the grid, but then a certain amount of it is in terms of your contract that comes from wind or solar, and you get renewable energy credits that you can then claim against your energy usage.
I see. So is it more expensive to build sustainable, and how could Africa benefit also economically for going as green as possible?
Mm-hmm. It's It can be more expensive. I think it depends on the organization, where you are in the life cycle of the company, where you are in your sustainability journey. For companies that are smaller, just starting out on their journey as companies in their business, the focus tends to be very much on raising investment for growth. So often it's, there's this conundrum. How do we ensure that we're growing? So whatever we're receiving in investment is applied to growing the company, but doing it in a way that's sustainable. And there's always that balancing act that you've got to have. And it isn't always less expensive. It isn't always the best option to go green. It'll depend on what's available as well. If you're a small data center, for example, and you've now got to start thinking about, well, can I put in solar? Solar takes up space. So you've either got to be able to put it on your roofs, over your parking, for example. But if you've got extra space, let's say part of your land that's free, then the question is, do we build data halls? Do we build a solar plant? So there's always that balancing act, I would say. And it isn't as simple as saying, well, it will be cheaper or it will be more expensive. I think you have to weigh up all of your priorities to figure out what's right for your business.
Yeah. So if you have to predict, this is for South Africa, in the next 10 years, we can quite comfortably say that more and more data center capacity will be built and more energy will be needed. Where the energy will be coming from?
Yeah, I think that's quite difficult to predict. If we look at the trends and where we're going, I think everyone who's building data centers is making a concerted effort to do it in a way that uses cleaner energy. I think the wheeling arrangements that the energy companies are putting in place are quite significant. So doing these arrangements where you get your credits, I think, are definitely very, very popular. Certainly there are, from all of the options, wind, solar, we see that solar is the most popular. It's also the easiest to implement.
The fastest, I guess, as well.
Yes. And cost efficient as well compared to, of course, wind. So I would say probably in 10 years' time, we will see a lot more greener data centers. And of course, technology plays a huge role. We don't know how, something innovative may come up that will just change how we look at green data centers, for example. Perhaps we could have solar panels on, and I think that exists already, on all of the windows of the data center, and even if it's in the materials that we use. So I think technology and innovation will play a huge role on how that plays out.
Yeah, I've actually seen some of those designs. But I guess the challenge with solar and wind is then that they are both intermittent. It's, the sun doesn't always shine and wind doesn't always blow. So I guess that's kind of the limiting factor.
It is, especially for data centers, because our core business is not just providing the real estate where you house your data. It is to provide power.
Yeah.
And uptime is really, really important for data centers. So our core business is to try and ensure that we have as close to 100% uptime as possible. So like I said, that reliable, consistent energy is really, really important. So I think perhaps what will change is that where now we have diesel generators as our first line of backup, as we see, more and more moving towards solar, perhaps the diesel generators will become our last resort backup, and we rely more on solar, wind, battery power.
Yeah. What about is there any talk in South Africa about biogas solutions for this? Or
there are. I think in South Africa, I think it's just across the entire range of solutions, everything from biogas, hydrogen, fracking, all kinds of aspects of how we're going to produce energy. So yes, there certainly has been. I think for now, we've gone through quite a struggle in South Africa of just getting to the point where we can have independent power producers being able to feed into the grid and that being available for everyone. So I think it just makes that I think from this point going forward, it'll probably have, it'll probably be a quicker process in terms of introducing new technologies. But from what I see now, the sort of most dominant technology is solar.
Solar still, yeah. I might have to be fact-checked on this, but I did see Instagram reels on China and these kind of waste-to-energy solutions. And apparently they are now kind of opening up old dump sites to find more kind of waste to be turned into energy because they are running out of waste. Let's fact check this. You can check it, but it is like hugely optimistic view for the future. Hopefully, those kind of solutions will be becoming more and more popular.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are just so many innovative solutions around everything, not just the energy. It is the materials that we use, how we design data centers, what we do with waste, using waste, not just physical waste, not just e-waste, but even the heat that's produced, being able to use that to generate energy. So, I mean, I think it's an exciting time we live in, and the next decade or so is going to see many innovative solutions.
Yeah. I'm also optimistic. Let's then talk about kind of the social side of things. Last year, I think in an event where we met first time, we spoke about data centers as good neighbors, and I'd like to hear kind of like your experiences with the OADC on setting up your data centers close to communities, and how do they perceive you as their neighbor?
Mm-hmm. I think the whole concept of good neighbors, I mean, that arises from your social license to operate. When you operate in communities, particularly, it's not just your legal license that you obtain, it's being accepted into those communities as well. That's quite important. Now, the thing is, for us working in the digital infrastructure space, that hasn't been a huge issue previously, I think, because many people didn't really understand what data centers were. And when you think about digital infrastructure, you don't really think about physical, the picture that comes to your mind is not really a physical structure. You think about data, you think about the cloud. So I think that question of social license to operate is relatively new for us in the digital infrastructure space. But more and more people are realizing, well, the cloud lives in physical infrastructure. Where is that physical infrastructure located? And instead of communities just seeing these buildings, they actually realize, well, that's actually a data center. This is what it is, and this is how it operates. I think clearly in the building process, everyone sees you as probably just, constructing a building. So from our experience in that construction phase, the stakeholder engagement is very, very important. So engaging with stakeholders, ensuring they understand what the business is that is being set up there. To a large extent, for us, we've mainly set up in existing office parks, existing business parks. So we haven't really had many greenfields data centers where we've gone out into places where we've had to cause disruption to biodiversity or to communities. These, wherever we operate, they are existing business parks in urban areas. Other things where we, interact with communities is on an ongoing basis. Of course, as a business in a community and being in that tech space, providing skills development is very, very important. Employing local people is also important. We prioritize employing local contractors. So skills development, we've got lots of programs. Our CSR program is very focused on skills development, working with schools.
And is that like for the data center skills or just skills in general?
It's a combination. It is for, with the contractors, it's for services that we need at the data center. We do try to recruit locally as well for actual data center skills. I mean, 10 years ago in Africa, being a data center technician was not a known career, whereas now there's a huge demand for that, so you can provide skills. We also, as part of our CSR, do provide training just on basic computer skills, just trying to, as part of that digital transformation, just trying to get the digital literacy up. We've got a program that works over a few years where we provide digital literacy, taking people all the way up to getting certification. So it's across the board. I think it is just everything from basic digital training all the way up to creating that pipeline of employees that we can then count on to run our data centers.
Okay. So to kind of track back a little bit, like, how do you feel like the kind of average perception on data centers are? Like, I guess first in South Africa at the moment, and then second in Africa. And I'm asking because this debate is happening a lot in Finland, where I'm from, at the moment, and it's the debate is just crazy. Well, like, we've been lacking new investments in Finland for a long time, but now, you know, we have cold weather and good engineers, so Finland is a really good place for data centers. But now there's a bunch of political problems between us and now those new investments. So the public perception on data centers isn't great, and a lot of the debate is run on a lot of misunderstandings as well. So how is this debate in here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, I think if we just look at what's happening globally, I think the debate around data centers is very much centered on the energy usage and the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. I don't really see that much in Africa. I think, from my perception, a lot of the debate has to do, and it isn't even a debate, a lot of the conversation is around the opportunities presented by data centers in terms of job creation, digital transformation, what that means, access to digital connectivity. That's seriously what I've come across in terms of conversations around data centers. It's about the potential as opposed to what I see the global conversation being, oh my goodness, we don't want data centers here because they eat up energy and they're going to be really bad for the environment. I think we're still at that stage where we're welcoming growth. We're looking at what the opportunity is around data centers. I think there is more and more an understanding. I would think that the majority of people, probably in the world, don't have a full understanding of what a data center does and what it is. And I think what's quite important to understand is that every one of us uses data centers. We're somewhere in that supply chain, in that value chain of the data center being used. And I think that perhaps ordinary people perhaps don't understand. Every time you send a photo on WhatsApp, every time you stream something, every time you even go online and use government services, all of that data, all your payments has to go through some data center. So I think that's actually quite important to realize that every one of us contributes to the requirement for data centers. And how do we balance that? We need to have that data stored somewhere. Yeah. And how do we balance that then with the energy requirement, the effect on the environment? And how do we see the opportunity there? Yeah. The opportunity for growth.
Even those people who online are now demanding shutting down of all those data centers needed data centers to do so, and I agree with you there. I think that's still big kind of challenge in the whole perception for data centers. People don't understand why they exist, and they don't understand that they are key and core for their lifestyle, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think traditionally companies would probably have just stored their data on the premises. But, as the data storage requirements get bigger and bigger, it makes sense. In fact, even if your data storage requirements are not too big, it does make sense to use co-location facilities, because then actually from an environmental perspective as well, you can actually use facilities that are properly certified, that place a lot of emphasis on the governance, on the ESG the management system, the risk management system. You get your certifications. So yes, it may look like this is this huge infrastructure that's not very environmentally friendly, but it actually makes sense. This is it's a service. It's part of what we need as a society, and the important thing then is to say, how do we take this energy challenge and make sure that all of the other aspects, all of the other positive aspects we're getting out of it, then balance that.
Exactly. I'll take you back to the community level. I think this was one of the topics we were kind of pondering and wondering last year here. And I was asking if anyone has done kind of research or any studies on the kind of like community level GDP impact in places where data centers have been built. So is there can you show a positive economic impact in the communities that are directly kind of close to the data center?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not aware of any studies that have been done, actually over a long period of time, looking at what the effect on the communities are, what the effect on the communities is, because data centers exist in that community. I think it's a variety of consequences that we can look at, or impact, if we want to do. I think impact is probably a better measurement to look at. If you look at what our purpose is, what the purpose of our digital infrastructure company is, or business. So, for example, our parent company, which has a connectivity business, WIOCC, has recently launched a business called Open Access Metro. And the whole purpose of that business is actually to provide connectivity, last mile, what we call last mile connectivity. So it's that connectivity from the POP to the business park, or to the housing estate, fiber to the home, fiber to the business. We call it FTTX. So the whole purpose of that business is digital access. And so I think if you just look at it from that perspective, that creates the sort of impact that you have that's broader than just saying, well, let's take individuals from the community and make a difference to them. I think the whole purpose of that business is to provide digital access. Another aspect that I've seen that's becoming more popular is where you have infrastructure companies, data centers included, if you're running services to your data center, so it could be energy, it could be water, it's obviously connectivity, then that then gets provided to the whole community, or part of that infrastructure is also used for the community, similar to what the mining companies do in order to get their social license to operate.
Yeah, makes sense. By the way, our human ChatGPT, Antti, has come back with the China case. So I was right about it. So China is the global leader in the waste to energy technology. They have more than 1,000 facilities across the country. So yeah, really looking forward to see more of that in the African continent as well. So if you could change one thing about how the industry here approaches sustainability, what would it be?
Just one thing.
3 things.
Well, let's start with one thing. And if we're specifically talking about sustainability, or let's call it even ESG, I would say what I find is when I speak to people in the industry, my counterparts in other companies, there is this tendency to see sustainability as, in terms of the function it has in the company, it seems to be seen as a cost center. It's something that you have to tick the box. I think if there's one thing I would like to change, it is to have sustainability embedded throughout your organization. And I think that's one of the things I find that we've done very well in our organization, embedding that, integrating it into all parts of your decision making and different parts of the different functions of your organization. And linked to that is then seeing the opportunities if you have, and I think that's one thing that Africa is really, really good at. Whenever we have challenges, we also see the opportunities there. Talking about waste, for example, and that increasing amount of landfills, I see so many entrepreneurs coming up with fantastic ideas about using waste to produce energy. And similarly with sustainability, all of these things that we consider to be risks or to be problems or to be challenges, then to look at what are the opportunities around here. There's a huge sustainability consulting industry that has come up throughout the world, a global consulting industry just focused on sustainability, on biodiversity, on climate. Those are huge opportunities for Africa because we have lots and lots of people, lots and lots of young people. So in terms of just potential careers, that is an opportunity for us to upskill people in sustainability careers. But certainly the one thing is just for us to look at sustainability as something that affects us all and that we all have a responsibility to contribute towards.
So finally, why should we care about African data centers?
I think we've had the conversation now about the fact that data storage, data usage affects everybody. We're all contributing to the requirement for data centers and that ever-growing expansion. And we haven't spoken about artificial intelligence yet, but with AI and how that is just causing exponential that's just growing exponentially and creating exponential demand for data centers. I think this now will affect everyone. Why we should care about it? It's firstly because it affects us all, and secondly because it provides so much scope, so much potential. Like I said, skills, the opportunity for growth, the opportunity in Africa to contribute to socioeconomic development. To contribute to economies. I think that's huge. So I think it can affect every one of us. It can provide huge potential for us all. And I think we can all contribute to finding solutions to the challenges like the greenhouse gas emissions, the energy requirements, and that just creates a better society.
That's great. This is usually my last question, but now that you brought out the AI, I actually wanted to ask you before that I saw you wrote about AI in agriculture related article on LinkedIn. So can you explain like what opportunities, transformational opportunities they are for AI in African, like transforming African agriculture?
Agriculture, wow. Okay, so yeah, we can. I can do that. So if you read that article, you would see my focus. So I guess you could think of it as I live in a rural area, and amongst a lot of farmers, particularly smallholder farmers. So I have a huge interest in smallholder farmers. So my interest in that article was particularly around when we talk about artificial intelligence and bringing AI into farming, into agriculture. The picture that you get is of big farms, big farming companies bringing this in, and I think I spoke about sort of AI-powered, self-driving tractors, etc. But the transformational part of it, I think, in Africa is with smallholder farmers, and where we see the technology making such a big difference is particularly through mobile technology. So just having access to all of that AI-powered systems, data on your cell phone. Something that a small farmer with 5 hectares of land wouldn't have access to otherwise without the smartphone, wouldn't have access to weather data, wouldn't have access to market information. If I'm just planting a small crop of beans, for example, how am I going to sell it? How will I know where to sell it? What prices? And I think that's where we see that we see in Africa. I know it's totally off the topic of data centers, but that's where we're seeing the real transformational power of artificial intelligence. And if you want to take that across industries as well, I think mobile phones have made such a big difference. And then if you combine that with fintech, we're seeing so much happening in agriculture, but in other sectors as well, combining online payments, combining mobile payments, using M-Pesa, for example. It's absolutely fantastic. I told you that my background is in structured finance, so just structuring transactions for smallholder farmers, for example. They wouldn't otherwise have had access to credit because they have no credit record, they have no assets as collateral. Now you've got a situation where you can link different players in that value chain. So yes, the farmer that smallholder farmer is going to sell to some big company. In the meantime, he stocks his crops in a warehouse. So you can have all kinds of structures around providing credit just based on that. And all of it happens via your smartphone. You don't have to have someone coming and fetching that or getting the money that's transferred, that's put into your bank account and then someone else's. It all happens via M-Pesa on your cell phone. So for me, that's really fascinating. We can talk for hours on that. That's something that really I have a huge passion for. But just how that has transformed just ordinary individuals who wouldn't otherwise have had access to all of this data, all of this technology.
It's a huge opportunity. Maybe my next podcast series will be Why Should We Care About African Agriculture?
That would be great. I would definitely speak on that.
Yeah, I'll invite you over. Sayuri, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, so thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
This podcast is part of the Data Governance in Africa initiative, helping the African Union shape data policies, enable cross-border data flows, and build secure, sustainable digital infrastructure. Funded by the EU and 5 member states, it supports a unified digital market in Africa.